I mean, there might be a few natural disasters and catastrophes still in the works, but the whole end case scenario where we're all in orange jumpsuits and we're all taken to the secret bases, none of that's going to happen. I mean, all the banking cartels and the dark cabals and all the economic ploys that people were planning since 9/11, they never ended up going to fruition. And even though there was this ploy to try and make the West fight with the East, it didn't happen. I mean, we had Iraq and Afghanistan, but it didn't turn into World War III. It did not turn into Armageddon. And even right now, they're trying to have a peace deal in Jerusalem, right? We're not escalating to a world war. And no matter what people try and say, you can still hear them trying to promote the Iran-Israel conflict, but it's not going to happen. I mean, they tried to do it at the end of Bush's term, and they've been pushing it here and there, but everybody knows it's not going to happen, and nobody wants it. So we've pretty much gotten past the point where anything is going to happen, and everybody in the disclosure community knows that because we're actually talking about beings of the light now in the higher realms, those who are on this third dimension, their nuclear technology does not function. And all of us know this now, right? I mean, we had the press club meeting last week, although the press didn't cover it at all. Those of us who have been in the disclosure community, we've known that the nuclear missile heads don't work. Right, Michael?
Right, but, you know,
We've heard those reports for years.
What worries me is that he did stand up and say that he'd like to wipe Israel off the map. And that's where I think that Israel might be put in a position where they might feel like they have to do something, but maybe they know more than we do. It was my understanding that it's not working now, but they're working on getting it to work.
Right, and that's the one trigger. That's the trigger that's always been there, right? The Iran-Israel conflict, and if we could trigger that, then we could create Armageddon. And there's a lot on the right-wing Christian community who want to trigger the Armageddon, right? Because they believe that, okay, once we trigger the Armageddon and we go through the whole tribulation, then Christ returns. Well, those who are truly of Christ consciousness are saying, listen, you raise yourself up in the rapture. You ascend up to Christ to avoid the tribulation. The tribulation is for those who don't have pure of heart so that they have to go through it. And you don't want to go through the tribulation, brothers and sisters, right? That's the whole point. It's not about seeing what's bad and then going into it. It's about seeing what's bad and then avoiding it.
I'm sure Christ is I'm sure Christ is a cool guy, and I'd love to hang out with him sometime, but I don't want him coming down, because if he does, then that's some serious business probably. So I'd like for him to wait for me to come to him, absolutely.
That's the whole point. That's the whole crazy thing. Here you got a Muslim on your show saying, listen, those of us who know what we're talking about, we want to rise up to Christ. We don't need him to come down here. We don't need him to come down here and settle the issue. We already know how it settles. It settles in his favor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? We don't need to be here in the fight.
You know, and then, you know, that's one thing that leads me to believe that, you know, there is a spiritual realm. There is a God of some sort. Because we're talking about astral projection, and I myself have had a few out-of-body experiences in my life. Now, uncontrolled, obviously, but and that right there, if you've ever had one of those, there, you know right then and there that there's something more. You can leave your body. Your body is just a vehicle. That, you know, you are energy. There's more to it than just this physical plane. Absolutely.
And if you try, whether it's astral projection or some form of meditation or just focusing on your dreams or, you know, eating a certain diet or even Reiki or 100 different other things of any form of spirituality, if you actually give it an effort for a handful of days, you're going to notice a difference. And sooner or later, the difference is going to be significant enough where you're like, whoa, that's cool, you know? Or you have one of those, whoa, God works in mysterious ways. And then you have another one, and then you have another one, and then you start to realize, wait, this was happening all the time, and I just wasn't paying attention to the signs before, and now you just slowly become more attuned to noticing this thing and then that thing, and then synchronicities start to develop, and before you know it, you're able to see a lot more than the next guy just because you're trying and you're paying attention, right? And you're trying to be pure of heart. Exactly,
yes. So, Saleem, I want to take one more break, and when I come back, I want to talk a little bit about Sasquatch. And I actually like to put together a Sasquatch UFO connection myself. And some researchers, you know, think, hey, it's possible, and others just don't want to hear it. But I want to talk about that when we come back in just a moment. All right, everybody. I am Michael Vera. This is Late Night in the Midlands, and we are back with Saleem. And, okay, yeah, so as I was saying, I've had researchers on here about Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call them. And, one thought it was possibly a great idea, these cattle mutilations, and so many focus on the UFOs and the aliens when it comes to that. And then I think about Sasquatch and how, now you see them, now you don't kind of thing. And sometimes I put a connection there, I guess, as to maybe Sasquatch is part of that UFO conspiracy, and perhaps they're the ones doing these cattle mutilations. What do you think about that?
Well, when you're talking about cattle mutilations, there's a lot of the research that deals with the cattle mutilations deals with specifically laser-type precision cutting and removing of organs with such advanced technology that you would tend to not think it's directly connected to a Sasquatch or a mutilation type attack, right? Because it's more of a precise.
They could be smarter than we give them credit for. I mean, it's not like the commercial where one guy screws around with the Sasquatch and the Sasquatch runs over and beats him up. But, I'm thinking maybe they're a lot more intelligent than we think. Yeah, maybe they're a lot more intelligent.
I'm not disagreeing with you there. I'm just trying to clarify the separation, right? I mean, when we're dealing with cattle mutilation, there are those of us who have been researching the cattle mutilation story and know what that relates to as far as grays and then some of the genetic coding and what they've been doing. And that's kind of an issue that's been going on for a long time. That's not just recent. That's been going on for ages, right? It's been one of the things that has always happened, terraforming and different kinds of genetic adjustments on the planet from people who have always been involved, right? When you're dealing with Sasquatch, it's kind of a separate story because a lot of times, generally, for those who are familiar with the Sasquatch is the term that they use for the Native Americans, right? The Native Americans use Sasquatch, the Tibetans use Yeti, the Abominable Snowman, or Bigfoot. When you deal with any of the ancient communities, meaning the Native Americans or the Tibetans themselves, both all the way on the west and all the way on the east, they both are very well known for being highly spiritual, right? I mean, the Tibetans, and the Native Americans. We all understand they're highly spiritual people that are connected to the earth, and, they have their own reputations. In both communities, they refer to those beings as elder brothers from the race of man. And when you talk to the spiritual elite from both the Tibetans and the Native Americans, they'll both tell you the same secret that I'm about to tell you and your whole audience, that both Bigfoot or the Abominable Snowman or any of those beings communicate with speech. And because they communicate with speech, they're not an animal race. They're a human race. Now, here's where you go into some crazy, crazy concepts where many of the ancient communities think we're talking about a line of race that is connected from the line of Cain, literally from Cain and Abel. When Adam was on the earth and Cain kills Abel, and he becomes the first one of the bloodline of Adam to commit murder. And God curses Cain and says, you will be banished from the surface of the earth. And you'll be everything that you toil and everything that you grow on the earth will not give vegetation for you. So Cain ponders the earth until he goes into the inner world or the cave world, according to most of the spiritual people. And the mark that Cain gets is because he acted like an animal, savagery, instead of recognizing the truth of his soul by killing his brother, is he gets marked with hair all over his body. And so you see this concept coming about, and this goes back into our idea earlier between the early Christians and who they thought the others were, or the early rabbis and who they thought the others were, that maybe they were different bloodlines and maybe they had mixed with some of the other beings from the skies or the bloodline of Cain, or maybe they're not from the same bloodline. And this kind of mythology has continued to go on all the way until now. But when you talk to the Native Americans or the Tibetans, they refer to Bigfoot and Yeti as an older brother, and they clearly talk about the fact that they speak. And I think the reason why you never see an actual Bigfoot discovery is because what happens? It says right there in the Bible that anybody who kills the son of Cain who is marked will be cursed for 7 years. And anybody who shoots at one of these beasts finds out what? After they look past all the hair, it's just a man, a wild man. And what does somebody do when they accidentally shoot another person? They do exactly what Cain did to our brother Abel. Dig a hole and bury him. Right?
Yeah, perhaps they're teleporting.
Talk to any of the ancient communities and they will tell you that Bigfoot and Sasquatch is a real creation. They communicate with speech. And, like we said, they have the ability to move through dimensions. They'll tell you both from the east and the west that the Yeti creatures or the Sasquatch creatures can become invisible. Not because they're extraterrestrial, but because they're at a little bit higher state than we are where they can vibrate at a higher rate that we can't see. It's the dimensional travel is spiritual enlightenment. It's vibration. So they're a little bit more advanced than us, believe it or not. And the reason why is because they were banished from the surface of the earth and they were forced to dwell inside the caves and maybe found connections to the inner earth or the inner realms or what people might call the true inner kingdom.
Yeah, and that's where I have if they are a form of a human being, then that kind of chops down the whole evolution thing. It's how could we have come from ape or from them if the ape or the Sasquatch is still here? And that's why sometimes I wonder if they don't, like you said, other dimensions. Perhaps they can teleport, and that's how they disappear so quick.
Well, the reason why I differentiate that specifically is because of the key of speech. Speech is such a specific key that other animals don't speak. As a matter of fact, even when we talk about it from a biblical, spiritual point of view, God gives Adam the word, speech. Now, those who are involved in the alien disclosure community talk about some of the other alien races, meaning not those who are humanoid like us, but some of the other alien races, and you hear that they all don't speak. They use telepathy. The verbal speaking is kind of something significant to us. I mean, when you talk about communicating with other beings from other realms, it's always in the form of some kind of vibration or sound. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, vibration. And sound, right? The do-do-do-do-do,
Right.
You communicate with sound and mathematics, not in verbal speech. Right? In India, you go to a lot of mystics, and everybody knows about the Beatles going to India to learn the sitar. Well, one of the things that they have in India is they have a lot more notes than we have in the English music system. And the reason why is even in India, they talk about the concept of the ancient gods and the ancient beings from the sky, teaching them music and sound and the vibration and the frequency and the songs of the siren or the harps of heaven, these concepts that there was spiritual connection to sound and frequency, or the horn of the Jews or the bell of the Christians, right? So
Right.
There's always been this connection to harmonics, and you're seeing a lot of people wake up to that, right? The idea of chanting and mantras and solfeggio frequencies, and the fact that harmonics and vibration can affect the cellular structure of your body, and that there's a connection to the spinning of the earth and the rotation and the spinning of your body and the rotation of your soul, or the spinning of your light body, the Markaba, and how that relates to frequency and light science, and that maybe there's a Markaba for the whole earth, and that the earth is getting ready to ascend herself, right? That we're not talking about just the ascension of one individual like Christ as an example, or the Prophet Muhammad performing an ascension, or any of the spiritual masters. We're talking about the point in time where earth makes the actual shift and earth ascends. The ascension of the earth. That's that point where the road splits. And those who are spiritually up to par, above the 50 percentile, or whatever the demarcation point is, ascend with the new earth. And those who aren't making the cut are going to some other realm where all of a sudden the tribulation has begun. And so a lot of the spiritual communities mark the changing of the sun as the sign between this world and the next.